Maybe I'm just an old man, but I would hope that most of the people currently listening to this video remember the video game moral panics of the 1990s, or at least know about them. I'm not alone, right? You guys must know about how, when the original Mortal Kombat game hit consoles, Nintendo censored the SNES version of all of its blood and gore, but the overwhelming popularity of the series on the Genesis and in the arcade led to a congressional hearing on whether or not content of video games needed to be regulated, considering they were all marketed at kids. You guys know about that, right? Or how about when, during that same congressional hearing, Joe Lieberman lambasted Sega for the game Night Trap, which he said promoted sexual violence against women, while admitting he never actually played the game, while the game itself was really just you taking the job of watching security cameras for creepsters, sneaking into a mansion to abduct girls from a sleepover party, and saving them by triggering traps at the right time? You know about that, right? You guys didn't just hear about all this watching the Internet Historian or something, right? You must remember being a kid and talking about this nonsense at school with your friends like me. I'm not just old, am I? A core component of why people like me grew up believing in the very broad tent of left-wing politics is Jack Thompson. Thompson was a Florida-based lawyer who came to prominence going after rappers in the 1990s from a conservative perspective. He believed that the excessive violence in rap music qualified as obscene and therefore needed to be censored. His attention later shifted to video games, using the same arguments. In fact, now that I'm talking about it, I'm pretty sure that a good part of why young, politically disengaged gamers believe the right wing was anti-free speech is probably due to Jack Thompson. Thompson routinely provided the early internet with amazing quotes and sound bites, and found himself lampooned in places like Penny Arcade, GameFAQs, Sega Sages as it was known back then, and Newgrounds, which were the closest thing we had to social media at the time. Regarding Sony, Thompson said that they were committing Pearl Harbor 2 due to their widespread popularity. He also said, "In every school shooting, we find that kids who pull the trigger are video gamers. Murder simulators are not constitutionally protected speech. They're not even speech. They're dangerous physical appliances that teach a kid how to kill efficiently and to love it. If some whacked-out adult wants to spend his time playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City, one has to wonder why he doesn't get a life. But when it comes to kids, it has a demonstrable impact on their behavior and the development of the frontal lobes of their brain. And regarding rumble controllers, which were new at the time, they give you a pleasurable buzz back into your hands with each kill. This is operant conditioning, behavior modification right out of B.F. Skinner's lab." Thompson would go on to blame multiple school shootings and other murders on video games, most notably Columbine, because one of the shooters owned a copy of the original Doom. Thompson eventually destroyed himself by repeatedly filing frivolous lawsuits to the Florida court surrounding these topics, and was eventually disbarred in 2008, to the widespread cheer and laughter of everybody. And by the way, one of those lawsuits was against Midway, the company that actually creates the Mortal Kombat games, not because of Mortal Kombat's violence, but because the character creator in Mortal Kombat Armageddon allowed people to create any character they like, and gamers were overwhelmingly creating Jack Thompsons in the game to kick the shit out of him. But despite Thompson fading away into the annals of gaming history, that didn't stop the moral panic surrounding video games. Back when Mass Effect 1 came out, the infamous right-wing news outlet Fox News ran a hit piece on the game, claiming it promoted lesbianism to your children because Liara, a blue alien whose species only consists of women, could engage in what looks like, by human standards, lesbian sex with a player character if you chose to play as a woman. BioWare, the developer, would massively trim down the same-sex romance options in the game's sequel, Mass Effect 2, and the people behind the game outright admitted in early 2021 that they had felt pressured specifically to cut the same-sex romance option for the obviously bisexual character Jack, due to that Fox News controversy. If you think the gaming industry has finally managed to shake itself of this moral panic nonsense, I'm afraid to say it's continued to the present day. Just a month ago, an Illinois House rep introduced a bill to ban the sale of all violent video games in the state, with the reasoning that doing so would somehow curb the uptick of violence in Chicago. And in 2019, the porn game Rape Day was banned from sale on Steam. And because politicians are gonna politic, the question of regulating or banning certain types of video games was once again raised. But wait a minute, isn't Nicola Sturgeon a lefty? Up until now, all of this censorship BS we've been discussing has been coming from the right. Well, we are now in a new era of moral panic, where the left uses the same line of argument as the right. And no, it's not the libs or the rad libs or whatever. We discussed why it's not already in this video. This is leftist censorship, using idpol as its basis, claiming race issues or women's issues or anti-war or whatever the fuck to censor the artist, as all authoritarians do. And oh boy, are these leftist censors Jack Thompson on steroids or what? Woke scolds lost their minds because Call of Duty Modern Warfare, a game about war, features white phosphorus as a weapon. Woke scolds blamed the Christchurch shooter's actions on video games, going so far as to say his live stream of the event looked like a video game for indoctrination purposes. Woke scolds pinned the Parkland shooting on video games, claiming that video games cause violence is like how smoking causes lung cancer. Woke scolds blame porn and video games for surges in violent crime. Woke scolds brushed off the protest against Blizzard's legitimately awful actions as racism towards China. Woke scolds dogpiled Niche Gamer for, I'm not making this up, interviewing the creator of the Yakuza video game series and actually being a fan of that game, which you think would be necessary if you were going to be a part of the enthusiast press. Seriously, these people shat all over Niche Gamer for interviewing a game developer, treating him positively and enjoying his games. What the fuck? I mean, why should a games journalist actually like video games, right? Why should he be happy to talk to the developer of the game that he likes? Hell, why would gamers go to a forum about video games and expect to be able to actually talk about video games? Places like r/games on Reddit are just full of people who hate gamers. In fact, r/games decided, for its April Fool's Day joke of 2019, to shut itself down for a day, and then post a long woke scold thread about how racist and sexist gamers are, and how gamers have a moral obligation to minorities to follow the social justice way. I think we all know why this is, right? If you're here on my channel watching this video, you probably already know that social justice is a corrupting influence. It's a seeping contagion that spreads from community to community, slowly turning them away from their original intentions and towards leftist causes. These people came into the original atheism community and shit it up, turning people like the Amazing Atheist from fedora-tipping edgelords into weird quasi-boy motor ContraPoints ripoffs. They came into the Let's Play community and shit it up, where prominent Let's Players were once not afraid to actually be funny, and now they're all just boring. They came into the internet reviewer community and shit it up, where edgy jokes were replaced with constant tone policing, and people like Lindsay Ellis, who pioneered the genre, now express constant regret at contributing to the angry reviewer trend. They moved into comics and shit it up. They moved into Magic the Gathering and shit it up. And as we all know, they moved into gaming and something different happened. Oh, they still shit it up. Gaming sucks now. But Gamergate happened. Unlike everybody else, gamers didn't just roll over and take it. Maybe it's because the gamers of the early 2010s were bullied as kids and found gaming to be their only refuge. Maybe it's because gaming is inherently competitive, and gamers can be autistically laser-focused on something. Maybe it's because gamers generally spend a lot of time in rowdy spots online, like Newgrounds and 4chan, and they're used to smack talk in game, so they've grown a thick skin. But unlike everybody else, gamers didn't just open the gates to the Trojan horse. Gamers said, fuck off. And ever since then, the moral panics have increased in both number and intensity, but from the left, not the right. Anna Valens, we regret to inform you that gamers are at it again. Gamers take themselves way too seriously, but they're also homophobic and must be stopped. Megan Condas, from Fortnite to alt-right, video games are white nationalist recruitment. Also, I'm a professor of video games, I know what I'm talking about, lol. Ashley Lynch, geek spaces are radicalized online and lead to the alt-right. Gamers are Nazis because they post Pepe the Frog. Reset era is, of course, the bottom of the iceberg. You can trace the Trump presidency and the resurgence of neo-Nazism back to two people: Zoe Quinn's ex-boyfriend who started Gamergate, and World of Warcraft player and terrorist Anders Breivik. It's gamers all the way down. This honestly just feels a lot like old people not understanding what young people do, and therefore immediately believing it to be bad based on their ignorance. Despite the theorized link between game violence and real violence being disproved at this point, there is a reason that video games are denounced for their violence by both Bernie Sanders—
I get appalled, and I say that as a father of 4 and a grandfather of 7. If you look at these video games, if you look at some of the movies out there, some stuff that's on TV, there is so much gratuitous violence. And I can't help but think that that just desensitizes children and people in general to what it is about. You know, when you have films where people are spraying guns and killing people, it desensitizes you to death and killing. So I think there's a lot of work that has to be done.
And Donald Trump.
This includes the gruesome and grisly video games that are now commonplace. It is too easy today for troubled youth to surround themselves with a culture that celebrates violence.
These guys are just too old to get it. Kind of feels like I am at this point sometimes. But a lot of these people aren't old, so it's not just an age thing. The effect we're witnessing here is absolutely what I discussed in my Play is Subversive video. The act of play inherently allows you to consider possibilities that run counter to the current power structure. So, when the right wields power, they censor entertainment that sparks the imagination, while the left cries for free speech. And when the left wields power, they censor entertainment that sparks the imagination, while the right cries for free speech. Nothing has actually changed, we've just been around long enough to see the pendulum swing. This isn't just an old person thing. Middle-aged people, even young people, who still believe that they're the current counterculture, have no idea why Zoomers are largely rejecting them. YouTubers? They're secret racists, of course. Hashtag? You mean fashtag, the new alt-right hate symbol. Even socialists are getting in on this. Of course edgy memes are the neo-Nazi entry point, dude. It's not that the youngsters are rejecting your political and cultural hegemony because they value free speech. Or hell, just for the sake of pissing you off for the fun of it, it has to be fascism. Milk, the OK hand symbol, Pepe. It's all just kids trolling adults, and adults who still think that they're kids, yelling and screaming about a rising tide of fascism that doesn't really exist. Oh yeah, also anime porn. If you whack off to hentai, you're a Trumpster. Okay, Karen. Why don't we just go back to blaming Elvis for spiritual degeneracy? I mean, why not? Before it was video games, it was Dungeons & Dragons. The Jack Chick comics were fucking hilarious, by the way. Before that, it was television. Back in 1977, there was a high-profile murder involving a 15-year-old who was a TV addict. And so television shows had their own moral panic. In 1948, 3 boys tortured and tried to kill another boy, and the media said they were comic book addicts. Why worry about the atom bomb when America is filled with millions of comic fans? In 1946, radio drama programs were ruining the youth of today. In 1904, a young murderer was reported to have been addicted to dime novel reading. It is the same thing every time. From the turn of the century up to the leftists of today, people in power don't understand why the youth reject them, and so what young people do must be demonized. Back in the day, a person who worked on the A&E show Intervention was known to anonymously surf the video game board on 4chan. Intervention is exactly what it sounds like. A reality TV show where they find mostly drug addicts and go through their histories, their current lives, stage an intervention with their families on camera, and then follow up to see if they stayed sober. The framing, the music, it's exactly what you'd expect from this kind of show. But this anonymous person posted on V that soon, the episode lineup of the show's first season would be revealed, and that among the alcoholics and heroin addicts, there would be an episode about video game addiction. This episode became a meme immediately after it aired on May 1st, 2005, and reaction images harvested from it are still occasionally used because it was over-the-top ridiculous. The other addicts in the series are primarily physically dependent on their drug of choice. Yes, they had shitty lives, and those lives caused them to start using drugs, but physical dependence on those drugs was what was holding them back now. Not so with Peter, who threw himself into video games because his entire life was shitty. And it was pretty clear that while he would probably still be a casual gamer, he would not be spending 18 hours straight playing Dance Dance Revolution if his family life was not so fucked up. And I think this is probably the case with Columbine, with the TV addict, the comic book addict, the dime novel addict. Moral panics are rarely justified, but in those few cases where there appears to be a link, I would bet that obsession over entertainment was not a cause of their violence, but rather a coping mechanism used to make their life bearable until it wasn't. And it is particularly disgusting to see leftists who spent literal generations being on the receiving end of this shit in one form or another suddenly turn a complete 180 on the topic now that they're the popular culture. The counterculture is definitionally counter-left right now. And so, of course, they must be hidden fascists instead of hidden communists. When the right says degenerate and subversive, the left says reactionary and problematic. But it's ultimately the same thing. However, the left is correct about one thing, that the political leanings of gamers appear not to be leftist at all. According to a survey conducted by the Entertainment Software Association, gamers, as a group, appear to be more politically engaged than average. They're more likely to vote. They lean left on social issues and right on economic ones. And they prioritize the economy in their concerns. In other words, they're libertarians. And that is enough for smooth-brained socialists to consider gamers to be fascists. To the point that when Trump was feuding with journalists, if you were to notice that regardless of Trump's faults, the journalists also acted inappropriately, they would bring up the specter of Gamergate. This nonsense continues to the present day. 6 Days in Fallujah is a game that was shat on back during the Jack Thompson Fox News era of video game censorship by rightoids, because the Battle of Fallujah had just happened and it was too soon. It went into development hell only to resurf in 2021 and get shat on again by leftists for glorifying the war in Iraq. I have said consistently, that the left and the right are both ultimately authoritarian, and I stand by that. The fact that people can swing so wildly between the two opposite ends of the spectrum means that the spectrum itself is factually inaccurate. Radical leftism and radical rightism are just anti-individualism with different coats of paint. And these people never actually change their thinking or their behaviors, they're just tyrants looking for a cause. It's funny to see people who once defended Harry Potter from the Christian book burners now burning those very same books themselves. Yes, the situation surrounding 6 Days in Fallujah spurred me into making this video, but I realized pretty quickly it's ultimately a non-story. In fact, even though it's only been a few days, I'm pretty sure it's blown over at this point. What I realized when thinking about the history of all this stuff is that the real story here is the actions of gamers themselves. Yes, gaming's shitty right now. There's microtransactions, always online, battle royale, censorship from all sides, loot boxes, screeching indie SJWs, China simps, and woke-skulled journalists. But unlike every other community that SJWs planted their flag into, gamers didn't change. They didn't cuck out and become socialists themselves. They built a giant middle finger and have left it up to this very day. They still want games that cater to their sensibilities, and they're still getting them, despite the screaming from the left that gamers are dead. We declared them dead years ago, guys. Why are you still making games for them? Those companies who go woke are slowly finding themselves going broke, and it's actually quite refreshing. It's a slow process, all consumer revolts are, but it has been a long, patient string of victories. The Last of Us Part 2 is a disaster, while the Demon's Souls remake is not, and the market is generally taking notice. Even among indie games, stuff like Hollow Knight or Isaac is considered top tier, despite being decisively non-political. I don't really know how to end this video. I just feel bright for the future of video games, despite all the problems that we have. Not because the SJWs are gone, no, they'll probably always be around, but because despite being propped up by every institution in this community, the actual rank and file gamers are largely rejecting them. I'm happy that I can still fire up my Twitch stream and play what games I want to play, to an audience who I know aren't woke scolds themselves. I'm happy that I can still pop over to Newgrounds or 4chan and talk to people who actually care about games. And I'm happy that the accredited, official, institutional parts of gaming culture have massive overhead costs associated with them, while nobody actually gives a shit about whether they live or die. The left may have won the throne, but the peasants no longer swear fealty to it. Thank you for watching, my friends. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to share it around and do all of the other algorithm positive stuff that the YouTube engagement metrics like. I don't know. Sub for more, or hit up my Patreon or Subscribe Star if you want to keep it coming. And be sure to stick around, because I'm putting up a new video every single day. So, I'll see you tomorrow. I love you.